Yeah, good to go. Good afternoon, everyone. The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on Treaty 6 territory in Métis Nation Region Number 4. These are the traditional territories and ancestral lands of Indigenous peoples, including the Plains Cree First Nations, Assiniboine, Winawag, Rocky Mountain First Nations, Stoney, Tsuut'ina, Nakota, Dene-Sulin, Saulteaux, Mountain Métis, Michif, and many other communities that continue to enrich the land on which the town of Hinton was established. And with that, I'll call this meeting to order at 4:01. Council, any additions or deletions to today's agenda? Councilor LaBerge.
I think I know the answer to this, but I had a question about 11.1 closed session, the economic development budget report. Reading through that, I'd like to have that discussion in public.
Councilor LaBerge. ICO Hanlon, any comments regarding that?
Thank you, sir, and through you and to Councilor LaBerge, to the whole of council. Administration agrees, and I have prepared a properly redacted report that I'll hand out, and administration would seek to move that to item 6.6 in open session. The matter of discussion is unrelated to the previous economic development officer. It's about the budget for that area. So I have got a redacted report that I would hand out at that time if council agrees.
Thank you, ICO Hanlon. Council, any other additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, administration.
Thank you, sir. Through you to all of council, administration would request that we remove closed session item 11.2. This is the report presentation from the Evergreens Foundation. Unfortunately, that individual is unable to be with us tonight and has requested that we reschedule to May 17th.
Perfect. Thank you, ICO Hanlon. With that, council, I'll entertain a motion. Councilor Hawes.
I'd like to move that we accept regular council agenda for May 3rd as amended, please.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. That'll bring us to our council minutes for adoption. Council, any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Councilor Magoon.
I'd move that we adopt the regular meeting of council minutes for April 19th, 2022, and the committee of the whole minutes from April 26th, 2022.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, again, we have a motion on the floor. Any questions or debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. That'll bring us to our citizens minute with council. This is your opportunity to come up. You have 1 minute to speak and share your thoughts, concerns, positive news, anything. And I see anyone here? Conrad, you have a delegation that's coming right after. Miss Davy Campbell, was there anyone online that set up? No, thank you. So that'll bring us to our delegations for today. And we have one, 5.1 Conrad Polachuk for the tax recovery file 2-145 East River Road. If you could just please come up, and the floor is yours.
Hello, Your Honor. I come today to present an injustice that was put upon me when I bought my place in 2017. I was not informed of the back taxes that was owed, so I came to pay the town clerk my taxes for 2017 and found out that there was approximately 10 years of back taxes owing. I paid my taxes for 2017 and got her to write on it property taxes paid for the year of 2017 on my receipt, and continued correspondence with the town tax department as I was doing research. I did research and found out that after 3 years, you were supposed to repossess a property that has taxes owed. I got my property 2018 property tax notice, and I found out that my 2017 was applied to the earliest year of property taxes owed. In that situation, I was not happy, contacted the town clerk and informed her that it was written wrong in there. I do not feel that I should pay the previous years of taxes owed before my residency. For 5 years now, I have been harassed for taxes that are not mine and the town's wrongdoing, not applying it to the right year. If you are willing to forgive all debt and interest before the years, I will not take this to a higher situation. I am willing to pay my property taxes for times I've been there. No interest since then, because it would have been paid on time if the situation had not arisen of previous taxes and it being applied to the wrong year. That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Polachuk. What I'll do is I'll open it up to council if there's any questions or comments. Councilor Race?
Thank you, sir. Conrad, you purchased your mobile home from Park Lane.
Yes, I did.
Was there disclosure from Park Lane that taxes were owing?
No, there was not.
Nothing declared that taxes were owing?
Nothing. I had paid cash, honestly, and they said it was mine. And 2 weeks later, I signed the paper for the beginning of the next month.
Thank you, Councilor Race. Councilor Hawes?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Polachuk. Did you use a lawyer to purchase your property?
I did not, because it was first time purchase and I had not even thought of it, just excitement. I had been working at McDonald's at the time, literally, and scraped up enough to buy a trailer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council? All right, Mr. Polachuk, I know you had chatted with a few of us prior to this. I think this is information that we could go to our ICAO and try to figure out. The part that I'm most curious is the protocol on when the town repossesses the actual trailer. And I do have some concerns with the trailer court's, I guess, position in this, that generally taxes continue from one owner. They just roll over to the next purchaser. So I think there's a lot of things to sort of figure out here. So what I know what I'll commit to is following up with the ICAO to figure out, okay, what are the protocols and the obligations regarding the taxes owed and what the municipality is bound to do after X amount of time if taxes aren't collected, and kind of continue the conversation from there.
There is presently an annex on my trailer because of the situation, which my correspondence with the town has been neglected for 5 years. So I would like this to be dealt with.
Okay. Council, anything further for Mr. Polachuk? Seeing none, thank you for bringing this to us, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Council, that'll bring us to our action items. We have 6 this evening. The first one is 6.1, 2022 Operating Budget Correction, ICAO Hanlon.
Thank you, sir. Through you to all of council. I'm speaking to page 11 of your agenda package. And we'll read in here a bit of background that council's familiar with. This is regarding the approved 2022 operating budget. On March 1st, 2022, council passed the following motion adopting this year's operating budget. That is that council approved the 2022 operating budget in the amount of $29,517,229.43. And 2023-2025 operating plan as was originally presented February 1st, 2022, incorporating all budget amendments as detailed in attachment 1 of that report being, for March 1st. Included in the budget amendments as detailed in attachment 1 in that same motion was the following council motion MD-2484. that committee direct administration to reduce reserves by $260,000 and to apply these savings to a reduced 2022 tax rate. This motion, the one I just read, MD 2484, confirmed that the town would transfer $260,000 from the 2021 annual surplus, that is reserves, once finalized by the auditor, to the 2022 property tax revenues. At that time, administration had estimated that this transfer would result in the projected 2021 tax rate increase or mill rate increase of 1%. Since March 1st and the adoption of the 2022 operating budget, and in preparing for this year's 2022 tax rate bylaw, administration has struggled with two matters related to this. One, confirming the town's exact 2021 year-end reserves and surplus amounts. And number two, balancing the required 2022 operating budget revenues in the adopted operating budget. I'd like to speak to those both briefly. The first one, confirmation of the town's exact 2021 year-end reserves and 2021 surplus amounts. As previously communicated, the town's finance area and auditor have had difficulty confirming and reconciling the year-end reserve account balances for the town, as well as accounting for the exact year-end 2021 annual surplus. Due to these two matters, the presentation of the 2021 audited statements was rescheduled to one of the June meetings of this year. As of this date, or as of the date of this report, administration is now reasonably confident that the projected 2021 annual operating surplus will be approximately $949,000. At the request of Councillor Labarge, I do have the past 4 years accumulated surplus and that information that I can distribute as well as we move forward. Hence, administration notes the following regarding the most current status of the projected 2021 annual operating surplus. You'll see the first line in the box at the top of page 12 reads the projected 949,000 less the 260,000 from council motion MD-2484 with a projected balance after existing commitment of $689,000. That's the first of the two discussion items. The second one, and probably more pertinent to us here this evening, is balancing the required 2022 operating budget revenues in the adopted operating budget. As administration has worked to prepare the 2022 tax rate bylaw based on the 2021 adopted operating budget, we have struggled to reconcile and balance the required revenues, particularly that the entirety of the required requisitions, and as we've come to realize, specifically the provincial education requisition. Unfortunately, it has been confirmed that the wrong numbers for the 2022 ASFF, the Alberta School Foundation requisition, had been initially inserted into the budget spreadsheet used throughout the preparation and adoption of the 2022 operating budget. This number effectively resulted in the adopted 2022 operating budget being short $195,000 in required revenues. To balance the 2022 operating budget while also including the originally approved 1% tax rate increase. This mistake requires that administration secure an additional $195,000 in revenues for the 2022 operating budget to confirm a balanced budget, estimated at only $100 surplus, while maintaining that plus or minus 1% tax rate increase for 2022. Would like to analyze some of the options available to the town of Hinton and to council this time. As stated in the background section of the report, administration is seeking an additional $195,000 in revenue to balance this year's operating budget while maintaining a plus or minus 1% tax rate increase for 2022. That said, municipalities effectively have just 5 avenues to raise or to increase revenues, and they are: the first, transfers from accumulated surplus or reserves into revenue. Number 2, increasing the municipality's annual tax rate to raise additional tax revenue. Number 3, decreasing operating expenditures while maintaining or increasing projected revenues in the tax year. Number 4, increasing user fees that may add or can add revenues. And number 5, grants. I do want to point that I'm not going to discuss grants at this time. Really, they're not applicable in the situation we face regarding the $195,000. But I would like to speak to the 4 options available for the consideration of council. The first being the transfers from accumulated, and I do want to, sorry, to my report, these are presented in the writers in my preference at this time. So the first being a transfer from accumulated surplus or reserves, restricted or unrestricted, into revenue. As I mentioned, this is the preferred option of administration, and we're seeking that council consider the authorization of a transfer of a further $195,000 from the 2021 annual surplus or reserves, yet to be and should be finalized by the auditor shortly, to the 2022 property tax revenues. This would total, through 2 separate motions, the one we saw and mentioned earlier, and the one potentially that could come this evening, a transfer of $455,000 into the 2022 property tax revenues and balance this year's budget. At the bottom of page 12, you do see how that would affect the projected annual operating surplus. It would reduce it from the previously discussed $689,000. If council were to authorize the additional $195,000, that would leave the balance at approximately $494,000 in the projected annual operating surplus. That's option 1 of 4. Option 2 of 4 would be to increase the municipality's annual tax rate to raise additional tax revenues. And in this case, I did mention this, we already have built a budget that contemplated approximately a 1% tax rate increase. So we're already going into the establishment of this year's tax rate with a 1% increase in mind. To add an additional $195,000, and speaking to our contractor, he continues to believe that a 1% mill rate remains consistent about $130,000. So a potential 2022 tax rate of 2.5% would be required. And let me just break that down for council. That includes the 1% I previously mentioned, but would require an additional 1.5% to make up the $195,000 shortfall. That's the second of 4 options available. The third option, decreasing operating expenditures while maintaining or increasing projected revenues in 2022. I do want to be honest, administration and myself, we've not prioritized this option higher due to the very short timelines necessary to consider a combination of potential projected revenue increases and possible corresponding expenditure reductions to realize a net revenue gain of the $195,000. However, it is theoretically possible to confirm a revenue increase of $195,000 and could be investigated by administration, and we would request consideration at a special council meeting, which could be called by council for May 10th, to give us essentially the balance of this week to try and come up with $195,000. I do want to state that administration believes that further expenditure reductions to the 2022 operating budget would result in possibly significant service level impacts, and it does not give us a lot of time to consider it, but I have committed to council to bring all options forward, and this is an option that could be realized in the next week. Number 4 is not one that I think you could come up with $195,000 with, but you could increase user fees to add revenue. This is another option municipalities have in their toolbox. In conjunction with each year's budget preparation, administration reviews and considers possible increases to user fees, typically through the town's schedule of fees and charges. This review was completed this year, and administration did not note any practical or desirable or preferred increases to these user fees. But I did want to note that the budget was already built with a 4% increase in the utility area. And so that 4% increase in the utility area adds projected revenues of $105,000. And so that's already built in to our revenues this year. You see some of the implications on the bottom of page 13 and the top of page 14. I do want to just summarize on page 14 the options as I feel are available to council this day. Number one, that council approves the transfer, excuse me. Okay, sorry, let me start again, sir. Number one, the council approves the transfer of an additional $195,000 from the projected 2021 annual surplus, anticipated to be $949,000, to revenues in the 2022 operating budget and 2023-2025 operating plan, as was adopted by the town of Hinton on March 1st, 2022. The second option, that council approve an additional $195,000 in property tax revenues in the 2022 operating budget and 2023-2025 operating plan, as was approved by the town of Hinton on March 1st, 2022. Sir, if I could speak to number two very quickly. We are not contemplating adoption of the tax rate increase here today. However, number two would effectively move the anticipated tax rate for the town of Hinton from 1% to 2.5% this year. And it's not stated in number two, but I wanted to make sure that that was connected. Number three, the council direct administration to review the adopted 2022 operating budget and identify potential revenue increases and expenditure reductions totaling a minimum of at least $195,000 in increased revenues for the adopted 2022 operating budget and 2023-2025 operating plan, as was adopted by the town of Hinton on March 1st, 2022, and the council schedule a special council meeting on May 10th, 2022 to approve required amendments to the adopted 2022 operating budget. Sir, with that, the author, I am available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, ICO Hanlon. Council, floor is open. Councilor Race.
Thank you, sir. So to administration, have you already taken a look at the surface levels that could be impacted to a tune of 195,000?
Sir, through you to Councilor Race, not as of yet. No, we have not. Perhaps if I could, to a certain extent, during the original adoption of the budget, we did go away and we were tasked with finding some savings. And so we've had some preliminary investigation into what those impacts could be, but not specifically to the $195,000.
Thank you. Councilor Race, yeah?
Yeah, just one more thing, but I can wait.
No, absolutely.
So typically we have someone from infrastructure come and talk to us about utility rates going up or down. And I notice here it's saying that the town will also be increasing the utility rate 4%. So no one will be presenting that.
Sir, through you to Councilor Race, that still must come to council. So it will come as an item from infrastructure, and it does require that the rate sheet to that utility bylaw must be approved by council to actually incorporate the 4% increase into the budget year. So it is, I do want to make it clear, the adoption of the budget is built on a certain amount of revenues anticipated and included in the budget. The 4% utility rate increase is anticipated, but it's not affected by the adoption of this budget. It requires a separate motion of council to increase those utility rates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Race. Councilor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you. ICAO, just because I know I'm going to have this conversation with members of the public and I want to make sure I'm breaking it down appropriately. If a citizen said to me, you know, what's at the heart of the problem? If I essentially said, you know, we as a council and administration worked off of a budget spreadsheet and it had both revenues and expenses, we basically, through that spreadsheet, it overestimated the total revenues that would be collected on behalf of the education requisition. Is that a good way of explaining it, or am I wrong?
Sir, through you to Councilor Magoon, it actually underestimated the requisition for the education amount. So,
okay.
And I would think more broadly, though you're not asking me, I think the comment to the ratepayer would be, this is a particularly unique situation that council faces, that there was a lot of individuals and various hands trying to move this budget through the process this year, and an item unfortunately kind of slipped through the cracks, and in that spreadsheet, and we don't know who, when it was first built, the wrong, usually you take last year's requisitions and you move them forward as a starting point, because they don't tend to change that much. And unfortunately, when that information was populated into this year's spreadsheet, a much lower number than should have been there was populated into that area. And it was carried forward, and it was not caught until the last week and a half or so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor LaBerge.
I mean, my predisposition on this, I guess, is to go, and I know we've had this discussion before, but now this is the second time. So the first error was 235,000. Now we're talking another 200 grand. So I don't know, we're $425,000 worth of errors or something like that in the budget. That's why I asked the question about, can you please send out what the surplus numbers have been for the last 5 years? And you have those. Can you hand those out to council, please?
Yes, sir.
So in 2017, it was 3.1 million. In 2018, it was 2.3. 2019, 2.3. 2020, 1.2. And then in 2021, it was 949,000. That's $9.9 million collected over and above the amounts of money that were approved by council. So these are the percentage increases over and above the percentage increases given those surpluses. So starting in 2017, 23.9, 17.9, 17.7, 9.5, and 7.3. That's what the equivalent amount of that money collected over and above the budget approved by council. So given these numbers, I would really like to somehow not build this 190. I'd like to see this savings be found in the budget somewhere.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I belong to a school of he who makes mistakes helps to fix his own mistakes. And so with that in mind, I don't need a specific name, but who made the mistake? Was it like our consultant, or was it, I don't need a name, but was it us? And what did we learn from this mistake that's going to help us go forward into the future?
Sir, through you to Councillor Taylor, to all of council, we don't know exactly who. My earlier comment did speak we had a lot of different people with their fingers and hands on this budget, and that's unfortunate, and that's not ideal. The question as to was it a mistake of council? It was most certainly not a mistake of council. How would we going forward better serve council and the community on this? I have spoken to the importance of us bringing to council a budget policy that council will look at and adopt, that will provide certainty on the information coming forward in future years, so that if you do have turnover of staff or staff missing, there's a policy that states what the procedure and the budget preparation plan is, and it should be able to withstand being down a person or shorthanded. This was an exceptional and an unfortunate year because it led to, as Councillor LaBerge noted, two pretty substantial mistakes.
Yeah, so like I said, I believe in those who made the mistake helping to fix the mistake, and I recognize this was a difficult budget year and you came in partway through. Nonetheless, we did hire consultants and whatnot and paid them lots of money to hopefully get it done right. So that in mind, my preference is to option 3, looking at operating expenditures to see what we can do. And I don't think it's maybe realistic to be able to find the whole $195,000, but I'd like to go try and see what we can do to find at least some of it, because then those that made the mistake are helping to fix the problem. And if on May 10th we have to pony up half of it or 2/3 of it to help out, well, at least we took a stab at trying to fix the problem. Just like Brian said, the second time this has kind of happened, so we have to try to sort it out that way, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I have Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. In looking at the analysis section, ICAO, if I could get clarification, number 4 on page 12 of 36 of our agenda package, increasing user fees to add revenue. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just, again, looking at the potential solutions. My understanding was with user fees, if we collect user fees, they are supposed to, or ideally supposed to go towards the service that we're collecting for. Like case in point, if we're going to collect water utility fees, they should go towards water. Is that was my understanding.
Sir, through you to Councilor Magoon, to all of council, that is either absolutely correct or typical, and perhaps what so when it comes to utility rate bylaw, for the most place when you're generating revenues through a utility, the intention is those utilities are those revenues are returned directly back to the back to the utility. Revenues that come in differently, so say transit, say at the rec center, they come back into general revenues of the municipality. They are not bound by or necessarily intended to only offset the cost of delivering those services. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Britt. Thank you, ICAO. That does help. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Councilor Laberge.
I would like to maybe focus this a little bit and put a motion forward. And I would like to, option 3, please. Yes.
Councilor Laberge, are you good with the
Yes.
wording? And would you like to speak to it?
Well, I guess when I take a look at the historical context of the surpluses that we've been collecting, I've got to think that there's some room. And as Councillor Taylor had indicated, maybe it's not all of it, but there should be a substantial portion of it there somewhere. Again, given that historical context. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Laberge. Council, we have a motion on the floor. I have one question for administration. With the previous 4 years of accumulated surplus being very large numbers, any high-level rationale or explanation on why this year's is projected at only $100?
Sir, through you to all of council. Well, and some just basic municipal bookkeeping. We cannot approve a budget that's in a deficit position. So I requested of administration, I wanted to know, in order to pass again, this is theoretical. Projects may proceed, they may not proceed. Some come in over budget, some come in under budget. But if everything being equal in the adoption of a budget, I just said I want a $100 surplus. I want to be able to do a balanced budget. I don't want to show any sort of significant surplus. And in my experience, you typically don't want to be showing a significant surplus. You want to be. So that's essentially where we're at. We could add more revenues. I think that just makes it more difficult for us. We're not bound by legislation to pass a budget with a significant surplus. We're just bound to pass a budget that's balanced.
Thank you, ICO Hanlon. With that, at least at the moment, I believe that I support this motion. If we're going to see something on May 10th, and the trend has been there's always surpluses, and I understand the rationale that we want to do a $100 surplus, but it seems that there is room within the current budget, as there's been room for the past 4 years. So, and if, as Councillor Taylor said, and I think Councillor Laberge, if that number is not 195 and if it's lower, then we have a more thorough conversation on May 10th to look at what the final allocation would come from, a previous surplus or any other option. But at the moment, I believe that I support this motion, and we can reconvene on the 10th. Councillor Taylor.
To reflect what I think all three of us have said, can I suggest a friendly amendment to totaling up to 195 and take out a minimum of at least 195?
That would be
Because
friendly.
in fairness, this has been a tough budget. You came halfway through, so I'm supportive of the good old college try.
Councillor Laberge, are you okay with that friendly amendment?
I would be happy with that amendment.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Councillor Taylor. And Councillor Taylor, if you could just have a look if the wording is.
Totaling up to 195. No. For the expenditure reductions, totaling take out a minimum of at least and put totaling up to 195. I think so, yes, please. I think that reflects what we all said.
Perfect, thank you. Council. Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, I'm going to be speaking in favor of the motion on the floor. Again, I think very much the same way as Councillor Taylor. I think there's a bit of a middle road approach here in order to demonstrate to the citizens that we're trying to be fiscally responsible. I think we can take a week, have a look at what the potential impact of looking for some of these savings might be, and looking at how we can balance that against the current surplus. I think that's a very reasonable way to approach it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council. Oh, I have Councillor Race and Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, sir. To administration, so May 10th, would you be coming back to us with the identified potential revenue increases and the decreases, like there would be specifics mentioned?
Sir, through you to Councillor Race, we have to, and I do want to just, if I can, speak somewhat to that May 10th date. We have to, as a municipality, confirm the date, the budget on that date, and I'll explain why. The reason for that is we must be moving forward to the tax rate bylaw with an approved budget that tells us the exact amount of revenues we're seeking to secure through the collection of taxes. And so that's why the May 10th is required. May 17th, I am going to be candid. We can't, unless we were to do a special council meeting on May 24th, we have to adopt the tax rate bylaw on the 17th in order to get our tax notices prepared and in the mail and out and to our residents on time.
I think I wasn't clear. I understand the date. I understand the importance of that date. When you come back on the 10th, will you be specific on what areas we could generate revenue and what areas we may have to decrease?
Sir, through you to Councillor Race, sorry, I wasn't clear. Yes, we would be looking, and I do want to speak to this because I have spoke to my team already. We're pretty confident on our revenues already. So we've taken a pretty hard look at that through this process with council, because honestly, that's the easy one, is the revenues. And I've never wanted to be part of the municipality, and I don't believe I'm part of the municipality that inflates revenues to balance the budget. That's not correct, and that's not fair to council or the residents. So I'm going to suggest the majority of these $195,000 are going to have to be found in cost savings. We will look at the revenues again, and if we can defend some increased revenues, we will, but I think the majority is going to come through reductions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. So I was supportive of the proposed motion as it was originally worded, but with the change in wording, I no longer support it. Reason being, I would prefer to see from administration what they would be proposing to achieve the full $195,000. Then council can undertake an exercise, depending on what's palatable and what's not, on how that gets reduced. If revenue numbers are increased or expenses are reduced, council can have that discussion and find that balance between increased revenues, decreased expenses, and contribution from annual surplus. I think that's an exercise that council should undertake. That gives us the greatest amount of options, greatest amount of flexibility when this comes to us on the 10th. If all we get is a report from administration on some number that's up to potentially $195,000, that limits the options that council has in discussing it and making decisions. Since we're on a timeline, I prefer we have the most options available to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Magoon?
No, your worship, thank you.
Oh, Councillor Taylor.
I actually agree with Councillor Ostashkuk, and I misspoke my friendly amendment to Councillor LaBerge, but it's just I mean, I'll support either one, but my preference is Councillor Ostashkuk makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor LaBerge?
Me too.
So if Councillor LaBerge wants to do another friendly amendment, perhaps.
Because I do think that that's the right place to have the conversation.
So council, what would we like to do if there's an appetite to change the scope of this? Councillor Magoon?
Just legislatively, I believe, and admin could correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Labarge could request to withdraw his motion from the table and then put forward a new motion, I believe.
Councillor LaBerge?
Could I please withdraw my motion?
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Council, we have a motion on the floor to withdraw. Any opposition? Seeing none, motion is withdrawn. Councillor LaBerge.
I would like to make my original motion, please.
And minimum of at least 195.
Yeah.
Councillor LaBerge, you are good with that?
I am, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Council, we have a new motion on the floor. Any debate questions? I see O'Hanlon.
I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. I just was hoping prior to discussion of council on this matter, interim Director of Finance, Ruth Boutin, would like to speak, had a comment.
Ms. Boutin? You are muted, I believe.
Pardon me. I just wanted to draw council's attention to a number that they don't seem to be noticing on the financial statement. In the statement, or the statement of operations, the actual operating number that you should be looking at, or we would be advised to be looking at, is the one that's called the Deficiency of Revenue over Expenses before other being government transfers for capital. So when you start looking at the surpluses, your operating surpluses are in fact deficits for the last 5 years, up until 2020. In 2016, you had a deficit of 135,000 and change. In 2017, you had an operating deficit of 622,000 and change. In 2018, there was an operating deficit of $1,019,000. And in 2019, the operating deficit was $786,000. So when you're talking about making changes to the operating budget, you should be looking at, particularly in relation to deficiencies or surpluses, you should be looking at that number rather than the total annual surplus, because the annual surplus also includes all of the government transfers and funding that we get for our capital projects. So if you could just keep that in mind when you're doing your deliberations, I'd sure appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank
Ms. Boutin. Just point of clarification, what was the operational surplus for 2021? I had missed that.
2021 is 900 and I believe we're thinking it's right around 949,000.
Deficit.
No, that would be a surplus for this last year.
Okay, perfect. So that remains unchanged. Okay, thank you. ICO Hanlon?
I think, sir, if I could, in fairness to council, council does not have before you the numbers that Ms. Boutin is speaking to. So that's another section of the, or do you have it there? I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor, then Councillor McGinn.
I thought the question you were gonna ask, staff member Boutin was, 2021, what was the excess of revenue over expenditures?
Administration?
2021, what was the excess of revenue over expenditures? Sounds like the surplus was 950,000. Last year, did we have an excess of revenue over expenditures?
Ruth, I'm not sure if you heard Councillor Taylor's question. I don't know if you've got that from the auditors yet, but do we know the excess to get to the proposed or the projected $949,000? Do we know what the projected excess of revenue over expenses is for 2021 yet?
So that is actually the $949,000 that we are talking about when we speak about the surplus. So there's going to be additional funds when the financial statements are completed, and that will include the capital transfers as well. And I don't have that number in front of me at this time.
Councillor Taylor?
That second part of that statement confused me with the capital transfers. What's that mean? Like, that means the number's bigger, the number's smaller? I don't understand.
Administration?
Ruth, are you able?
I apologize, I did not hear Councillor Taylor's comment.
That second part of what you said about the capital transfers on the 949 confused me. What does that mean?
So the 949,000 is the operating surplus, and then when you see the financial statement in June, you'll see that there will be an additional amount related to government transfers for capital. So the surplus is going to be higher than 949, but only 949 of that is related to operations.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I apologize. I've been informed of an urgent situation to return before council's finished, but I have to go get something.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. If we could just note that Councillor Magoon is exiting at 4:48. Councillor Ostashik.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Councillor LeBerge.
So as I work my way through these statements, then I guess if I look at the revenues and expenses, those expenses would include our capital projects, wouldn't they? That's a question. The expense section there includes capital expenditures.
Administration.
Ruth, I'm going to actually ask you on this. I don't believe specific to any given year, but in our years, when we take a look on our audited statements and we see the excess or deficiency of revenue over expenses before other, does that include our major capital through the year, our major capital expenses? Not necessarily funded by grants or other transfers, but does that include our major capital works done by the town of Hinton?
No. Now this is where the need for the amortization comes in. the costs are taken out of operations and they are placed on the balance sheet as assets. And then they are amortized, and you'll see that amortization number just where is that on that financial statement? The amortization is reflected elsewhere on the statement, but it's only a portion of the costs that you would have incurred during the course of the year. So the rest of it goes into the balance sheet, and that's where things start getting messy.
So if we add up all the annual surpluses for the past 5 years, they total $10 million. So then to follow the logic through, what we're saying is we collected $10 million from other orders of government to the tune, we collected revenue from other orders of government to more than 10 million or $10 million more than we actually spent on capital projects. I mean, if we're running an operating deficit and we have a surplus of $10 million over 5 years, and other orders of government must have given us $10 million that we didn't spend. I'm having a hard time following through the immense number and the fact that there's this, operating deficit.
Administration, any?
I'm actually, just for the point of clarity, I'm hoping Ruth can help answer Councillor LeBaire's question. Or is that something that you could speak to, Ruth?
I can attempt to. I don't pretend to be a wizard with accumulated surpluses by any means. Generally, what happens is that those capital funds, those consist of grants and whatnot from other levels of government. Yes, you will find them either included in your asset values, your tangible capital assets, or you will find them sitting in reserves. You do have quite a significant amount of reserves, restricted reserves. In each and any given year, you've got roughly between 7,000 and 12,000 in any given year, or 12 million, 7 million and 12 million in any given year sitting in your restricted reserves, which are made up of funds that are still not spent, like gas tax and MSI, and funds that you've decided to place into your reserves, your various different reserves. I hope that helps a little bit.
But these surpluses are over and above the reserves approved in the budget. Is that not correct? So there's a budgeted amount flowing into those reserves. These are over and above that, correct?
The accumulated surplus, that includes all of your reserves. So when you look at your accumulated surplus, it's made up of three things. It's made up of your unrestricted surplus or deficit, which is what is most often related to your operations. Your restricted surpluses consist of your reserves, and then you have your equity and tangible capital assets, which is basically what the town is worth. Does that help?
Councillor LeBaire's?
No, I guess I don't understand. But if the reserves, I was told when I asked earlier today, I was told that the reserves were contained in the budget and that these surpluses were over and above council approved reserve amounts. If that's not the case, then I guess I'm surprised at how small these numbers are, because we put $3.1 million into reserves. So if they're in these numbers, if we have a reserve contribution of $3 million a year, we should have a surplus of at least $3 million a year, if they're not included in the reserve. Isn't that correct?
I'll go back to
I'm not really clear on what you're asking me. Sorry, if you could repeat that, Councillor Labarge?
What was our contribution to capital this year? Or, sorry, to reserves? 3.1? Is that 4.2? 3.2? So we approved reserves of 3.2, which I think is historically, like last year, it was 3.2-ish. But our annual surplus was only 2.3. So if that surplus should have the reserve numbers in it, then it should be sort of $3 million every year. At least.
So what I'll do, I'll give administration a moment. I'll go down the queue. We've went back and forth, I think 6 times on this one, and we can perhaps work on rephrasing or working that. But I'll give administration a moment to collect their thoughts on answering that question a bit more clearly. With that, I'll go to Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. If there is no motion on the table, I was willing to put forward.
There's a motion. Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Taylor.
I have a lot of questions that are similar to Brian, and I think about what we're talking about in 2 segments. One is how you deal with the 195, and we've got a motion. So I'm suggesting procedurally that we vote on that. And the second part, from my way of thinking, is the 2022 surplus reserve and what we should do, if anything, with that. So if we vote on that, then we could discuss that, and at least we got the first part done. That's what I'm suggesting.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council? Any further debate or questions? Seeing none. Councillor Magoon?
Point of information, legislatively, if I could get clarification from administration if I'm still eligible to vote, as I was out of chambers for part of the information.
Administration?
Sir, through you to Councillor Magoon, I would suggest that you abstain from voting on this matter.
Thank you, ICO Hanlon. Council, any further debate? Seeing none, I will call to question that council direct administration to review the adopted 2022 operating budget and identify potential revenue increases and expenditures reductions totaling a minimum of at least $195,000 in increased revenue for the adopted 2022 operating budget and 2023 to 2025 operating plan as was adopted by the town of Hinton on March 1st, 2022. And that council schedule a special council meeting on May 10, 2022 to approve required amendments to the adopted 2022 operating budget. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? Oh, and that's carried unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, can I make sure that the record notes that I abstained on the advice of the ICAO and the fact that I was not in chambers for the full debate?
Council, anything further? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, the second part of my concern with this topic is related to the 2022 surplus. And my concern is it sounds like the 2021 annual surplus, which was 549, it sounds like it's in an unrestricted account.
Administration, is that a question or?
I guess that's a question. Then I have another.
Administration?
Sir, through you, I'm gonna ask Ms. Boutin if she'd like to speak to that. A previous year's operating surplus or deficiency is typically forms part of the accumulated surplus going forward. Is that correct, or does it go to a special account? I believe that's the question coming from council.
You're muted.
My apologies. No, that is correct. That is usually the process.
It goes to an accumulated account.
So the accumulated surplus, if council were to take a look at the information handed out to you at tonight's,
Yes.
the very bottom line, you'll see an enormous number, which includes the value of the town of Hinton. And so unless otherwise directed, your accumulated surplus or any operating year-end deficiency affects your accumulated surplus end of year. So that number, for your most recent audited statements, year-end 2020, is $162,740,642 for the town of Hinton. Now, Ms. Boutin can speak to this as well, but some communities by motion, much as you've already done with $260,000 this year, can move some of that specifically. So that can be done. It doesn't necessarily go to the accumulated surplus. However, if there is no direction of a council on it, that's where it will go, is the accumulated surplus year end.
Councillor Taylor?
Well, the sense I get with that sum of money is that it's getting treated as kind of a contingency account, because this isn't the first meeting that we've talked about going back to that sum of money, the $949,000, and using it to pay for a project that we didn't anticipate in the budget. So that means to me, it seems like it's a kind of contingency fund. If that's the case, I don't like contingency funds, especially ones that large, because they don't encourage tight budget discipline or tight budgeting. And my suggestion would be, if we're going to treat it that way, then it might be more appropriate to transfer it to a restricted reserve, recreation or something like that, rather than leave it in an unrestricted reserve and keep treating it like it's a contingency fund. Just a sense I get. I don't know if anybody else is getting that sense with that sum of money.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Ostashik?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask administration if they've got any insight on how we wound up with an annual surplus of $949,000. This is maybe an anomaly, or if we could get an indication of where that may have come from.
Sir, if I could, through you to Councillor Ostashik and to all of council, I'm also going to ask Ms. Boutin to join us. I'm going to speak more broadly, and Ruth, if you would like to chime in with anything else. I think very quickly, just because there is a bit of confusion and it may have been generated by myself, I'm going to go through the handout that I handed out to council. And so just as a reminder to your audited statements, your excess of revenue over expenses, so not the larger number that has been confusing us somewhat, your expenditures over your revenues. The town of Hinton in 2020 exceeded its revenues, the revenues exceeded its expenditures by $888,010. However, the previous year in 2019, our expenditures exceeded our revenues by $786,783. In 2018, our expenditures exceeded our revenues by $1,019,246. And in 2017, our expenditures exceeded our revenues by $570,589. So administratively, there is a recognition that our operating surplus or deficiency is something we try to keep, and I talked to some other councillors earlier, we try to keep it in around 500,000. As to why in certain years it's higher, in certain years it's lower, some of your major projects don't proceed. Sometimes your revenues come in under, whether it's development is down or development is up higher than expected, so development permit revenues and so forth. Building permit revenues exceed expectations. Your revenues just get higher. Usually what you'll find with your surplus being a little higher than expected or somewhat higher than expected is that some of your major expenditures didn't proceed. A project, the weather didn't cooperate, or you were unsuccessful going to tender. So you might have put, for argument's sake, $1 million into the project to complete something, but you went to tender and you were unsuccessful. You weren't able to tender the project. It did not proceed. There was $1 million saved by not spending anything, but there was still $1 million into your budget. And so that would add to a fairly significant surplus that year. I don't know, Ruth, if you can help us specifically to the 949,000 and coming to the counselor's question, I believe the question is there anything specific that we can point to as to why the operating surplus is $949,000 this year?
I apologize. No, I do not have that information at my fingertips right now. I could discuss that with the auditor if you would like me to and find that out, but I don't have it with me right now.
Councillor Stashik?
If I could follow up. So I agree with Councillor Taylor that it's a bit of a concern. I wanted to know from administration how it came up. If it's an anomaly and it's because of something in particular, okay, I understand, that's fine, no problem. But in looking over the history, we've had deficiencies every year. Up until 2020, there was a surplus, an excess. And I feel that I probably have an understanding of why it happened in 2020, but I don't know why it happened in 2021. So that's what I was looking to administration for. Every year, that deficiency, it's offset by the capital revenue that comes from government transfers. So we're never actually losing money. But our budget shows a deficiency other than 2020 and 2021. So if we're actually over budgeting and collecting $949,000 that we didn't actually need, then yes, that's a huge concern, and we need to take a look at that through budgeting. But if it's due to deferred projects or things that were supposed to happen, I'm assuming there's probably some impacts from COVID in there. I don't know what the impacts are that caused us to have a $949,000 surplus. And that's part of what I'd like some more information on, so I have a better understanding of where that came from.
Councillor, thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Taylor?
I think it's a great question that I'd like to know the answer to too, and whether we put the rest of the money into a restricted reserve or something depends on the answer to that question. So either we make a motion and ask for the answer, or administration maybe commits to coming back with the answer.
IC O'Hanlon, if there's an appetite of council to receive a report that speaks to the 2021 operating surplus and possible options on reallocating the remaining amount, what would you recommend that direction be for administration to provide council that information?
Sir, through you to Councillor Taylor, to the whole of council, my preference, my thoughts on this matter to council would be to allow our auditor to return in June and provide us those audited statements. Within that audited statement, we will confirm the exact amount of any potential operating surplus. I would believe we've got enough time that we can undertake administratively to have some more information at that time for council as to what, was it COVID, was it deferred projects, what was it that actually led to the confirmed operating surplus? And then we can speak to it. I have, through the end of the budget process, spoke with some councillors as to my thoughts on what you could potentially do with a surplus, and that's a matter that we could discuss in June as well if you wanted to. I envision that being more maybe part of the budget philosophy discussions and the development of a budget policy for the town of Hinton going forward. But we could certainly start to speak to it in June. My concern about doing it prior to that is we're just continuing to speculate on what the number is going to actually be. And I would like to be able to come to council knowing exactly what our auditors have confirmed that number to be. And then that'll, frankly, it will also give us time to internally have a discussion as to why is that so much higher? What did not happen? Because I don't believe it's suddenly we exploded with revenues. So I believe it's going to be certain expenditures did not occur during COVID, and what were they? And is that what led to it, or was it something else?
Okay. Thank you for that, ICA O'Hanlon. Council, anything further, any direction, or are we complete? Councillor Taylor?
I don't mind waiting till June. I'm happy to wait till June and we'll get a good answer. The biggest problem I have is treating that, what looks like it's going to be 494,000+ like it's a contingency fund, and then not instituting rigorous budgeting and expenditure control. So as long as we're very careful in what we do with that money, until we understand what that money's from, I'm okay.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, anything further? Seeing none, thank you, administration and council. That'll bring us to 6.2, Hinton Bike Park Trail Expansion Sustainability Capital Project, ICAO Hanlon.
Thank you, sir. With that, and just moving council to page 15 of your agenda package, I'm going to hand this over to the Director of Community Services, and Ms. Horath will take us through this item. And thank you.
Thank you, ICO Hanlon, through to the mayor and council. So this item was before your committee on April 12th. The report has not changed much, if any, since then. We don't have any new information that would perhaps impact your discussion or decision this evening. So the capital budget, of course, did get approved on December 7th. With the timing of the civic agencies that came to present to council, that did not happen until the following week, where the Hinton Mountain Bike Association did also request for this capital funding to come from the reserve. On the April 12th meeting, I know that you received a letter from the group, and so the only thing that has probably changed is right in the middle of page 16 of your council agenda package, just a confirmation that allocating this $25,000 from the reserve for this project does not reduce the transfer to the reserve that council makes every year, which is part of the agreement we have with the Bike Association. And it also does not reduce the operating contribution that council makes to the operations in that partnership that we have. So there is money in the reserve, in this restricted reserve, to fund the project this year instead of deferring it and delaying it till next year. And it will have a significant impact on maintaining the integrity of the work, the $100,000 and more than that, with all the volunteer work that went in last year on the trail system. So the recommendation before you this evening is that this project take place in 2022 and that $25,000 be funded from the mountain bike restricted reserve. And I can answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Howarth. Councillor Magoon.
I'd like to make a motion that council approve the Hinton Bike Park Trail Expansion Sustainability Capital Project to take place in 2022 with $25,000 to be funded from the town of Hinton Bike Park Restricted Reserve. And briefly, if I may, this is one of those items I think that caused me to rethink budgeting a little bit. It was just, it's understanding and realizing that when we have a restricted reserve where the fund is in there for a specific project, it just makes sense that the projects that, should be happening sort of go through. So that was a learning for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor, which is the recommended action. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. So I'll be supporting the proposed motion. I agree with everything Councillor Magoon said. This is one of those things I'm looking forward to when we do our 2023 budgeting, that we get this ironed out, that when these groups who have dedicated reserves that are holding money for them to do capital projects, that they're not actually weighted against town projects. I've spoken to this before when we talked about the Hinton Disc Golf Association and their request for capital money to do a bench project. It's money that's being held for them for their capital projects. So to me, it should just be a line item in the budget that council can ask some questions about, but as long as council approves it and the money's available in the dedicated reserve, it's theirs for the taking to do their project with. So I fully support this, and I look forward to seeing something different through the 2023 budget process to make this clearer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Council, any further debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question that council approve the Hinton Bike Park Trail Expansion Sustainability Capital Project to take place in 2022 with $25,000 to be funded from the Town of Hinton Bike Park Restricted Reserve. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, anything else for second item? Seeing none, that'll bring us to 6.3, Cemetery Columbarium Capital Project, ICO Hanlon.
Sir, could I just request maybe
Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'd like to reconvene this meeting at 5:20. That'll bring us to our third action item for today, Cemetery Columbarium Capital Project, ICO Hanlon. And back to you. Was there anything else from administration?
Nothing, sir. Thank you very much. On to item 6.3 on your agenda, starting on page 21 of your package. And I will hand this item off as well to the Director of Community Services, and Ms. Hobath will take us through.
Thank you, ICO Hanlon, to Mayor Michaels, through to Council. This is another report that you saw and had time to discuss and review back on April 12th, with direction to bring it back this evening for decision by Council. This is our cemetery columbarium. We have run out of room, and we now have a wait list for that item. This project will be funded from our Cemetery Perpetual Care Reserve. It is underfunded right now in order to purchase two, but we definitely have the financial resources in there to prepare a site and have one here in as short order as we possibly can. So the recommendation of administration is that this project take place in 2022 instead of 2023, where it was placed in the long-term capital plan. With up to $60,000 to be funded from the Cemetery Perpetual Care Reserve. We are ready and have been working with our internal team in infrastructure services to try to partner with some of the concrete work, for example, that's going on that they're doing this year. So we'll find some savings there as well. But at this time, we have a wait list and no further room in our current columbariums. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Councilor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the council approve the cemetery columbarium capital project to take place in 2022 with up to $60,000 to be funded from the Cemetery Perpetual Care Reserve. And then just briefly, Mr. Mayor, this is one of those things where it just needs to happen. There's a dedicated reserve for it, and I just don't think it's right that people have to wait in order to, pay final respects to their loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Councilor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. If I recall, the preparation for a second columbarium is also going to be achieved at the same time, the foundational. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Councilor Hawes. That is our intent. We are hoping to get as much of that prep work done so that should we be able to increase resources to that reserve through the budget next year, and the spots and to fill up again, we'll be ready and be able to just drop one in there. So we're looking for those efficiencies as well. That's our plan, is to have that whole site kind of cleaned up a little bit, prepare for 2 columbariums, and place an order for 1.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Councilor LaBerge.
So how many, I don't know, what units or suites do we pick up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Councilor LaBerge. There are 60 in each unit in the columbarium. There's niches, there's that many sides and about 12 sort of in each one. So there's spots for 12 niches. They can accommodate a couple of urns. We're seeing a trend in that too. People wanting to put two in one spot. So we're trying to order one that has a little bit of a bigger space in it. It won't look significantly different from the other columbariums that are up there, where it will look like it's out of place. But we were able to accommodate some of the feedback that we're getting from the families, where they would like to put either a couple urns or an urn and a couple items in there.
Thank you, Councilor LaBerge. Councilor Taylor.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, of course I support this. I'm just wondering why the costs you presented add up to 55,000, yet we're asking for 60,000 from the reserve. And the 10% contingency is already worked into the $50,000 price. I'm just curious as to what the extra 5,000 is for.
Administration?
Sorry, if you give me a few minutes, I can double check the math. It should be added
Page
up to
26
60.
at the top.
Yep. And
It adds up to about 55,000. So just wonder why we're asking for 60. And that includes a 10% contingency, which seems reasonable.
perhaps the where it says plus overall contingency of 10 should be added to the end of that sentence instead of added to the 92.
Sorry, could you repeat that, Ms. Howarth?
So on page 26, I believe Councillor Taylor is asking, he's adding up the amounts that are in the, sort of, it says total project cost of $60,000. I'm not sure if anybody else is doing any quick math here. 46,000 and the 4,600 added to the other two numbers, that where it says plus overall 10% contingency, without giving me a couple of seconds just to double check those numbers. I'm assuming the 10% contingency is added on top of all those actual costs, and that's where the extra up to $5,000 is coming from.
So it would be 46 plus 4,600 plus 9258 would equal 60,000. Councillor Taylor, any further questions, follow up?
No, that's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, any further debate, questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question. That council approved the cemetery Columbarium capital project to take place in 2022 with up to 60,000 to be funded from the cemetery perpetual care reserve. Council, all those in favor? Let's pass unanimously. Anything further for this item? Seeing none, that'll bring us to our fourth action item for this evening, amendment to Debenture borrowing bylaw 1167-1 Boutin land development. ICO Hanlon.
Thank you, sir. I will also on this item, which is on page 27 of your agenda package, we are looking to amend the bylaw, specifically the percentage rate. We were delayed in getting this bylaw adopted, and there was a couple of rate hikes, and unfortunately that's affected this. So I will ask our interim director of corporate services to join us, and she will take us through this item starting on page 27.
You're muted. Ms. Boutin, I believe you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, interim CAO Hanlon through to council. This bylaw number 1167 was a bylaw authorizing a debenture for $820,000 for the site servicing development of the Boutin lands to leverage the CMHC grant funding approved for the Rapid Housing Initiative, and was approved at a regular meeting of council on April the 5th, 2022. The borrowing bylaw included an annual payment of $95,900 with a fixed rate of interest not to exceed 3.08%. At the time, administration informed council that we may need to return with an amendment to the bylaw if the interest rates increase prior to completion of the application. The Bank of Canada increased their prime lending rate 0.25% on March 26th, and on April 13th another 0.5%, resulting in an increase to the amount needed to cover the costs of borrowing for the project. Administration is recommending that the bylaw be amended to compensate for the increase and to anticipate for a further potential increase before the loan application is completed. The current rate as of April 26th is 4.17%, and when I was in the website today, I noticed that it's gone up to 4.76%. So it seems to be fluctuating quite significantly these last few days. I expect that by the time we get the application in, and once we do get the application into their office, then they will freeze the rate for us. So I'm hopeful that we can get it in before it goes much higher than the 5% that we're asking you to approve today. Now that doesn't mean that we're going to have to use that rate. We can use anything below that, but the rate will not be able to exceed what we're asking. There will be no requirement to wait the 30 days or any of the processes that we had to do previously with the first bylaw, because that's already been done, and the change is not exceeding 15%. of the total cost of the project. So we're covered through the MGA on doing this quickly and efficiently. I don't think I have anything further to add to that at this time. Administration is recommending that we give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw tonight, which is only an amendment to bylaw 1167.
Thank you, Ms. Boutin. Council. I have Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council agree to give first reading of bylaw number 1167-1, amending
And Councillor Haas, would you like to speak to that?
No, I'm fine.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, we have a motion on the floor. I have Councillor LeBairs and Councillor Taylor.
So I do have a question then on the whole public engagement. $10, I get $198,844. Divide that by the 820, I get 24%, which would mean the increase in the cost. And administration.
Administration?
Sir, if I could,
Or perhaps we lost her.
Oh, sorry, the council streaming seemed to be interrupted on the audio there for a period. I apologize. Interim CAO, could you paraphrase the discussion? I'm sorry, I didn't hear most of Councillor Labarge.
Can I,
Sir,
so
please.
Ruth, Ms. Boutin, so what I did is the percentage increase from 308 to 5.5 is a percentage increase at 2.42. So if I take the $820,000 we're going to borrow and I multiply it by that increase, I get $19,844, which is the amount of interest we would pay more than was approved under the 3.08%. If I multiply that $19,844 by the 10 years, I get $198,844. So that's actually a 24% increase over the $820,000 we're talking about here. Is it not?
Well, I won't argue with you. I believe you probably have your math correct.
If I may, I'm trying to do quick math. The cost of borrowing in the first year should decrease each year after with the principal amount being lower. So I don't know if the number is 198 exactly, but there is an extra cost. I just don't know what that number would be. It would be 19,000 for the first year, and if the cost of borrowing would decrease per year is my understanding of it. So, but regardless, there is
The
an
number's
increase
at
in-
24. I just like to make sure we're within the parameters of the MGA.
So I'll leave that with administration, as I believe ICO Hanlon is trying to look into that. Or any comment at the moment, or do we want to park that with you?
Sir, we had proceeded under the assumption, and I'm going to suggest the 15% consideration was the overall amount, and I don't think they did the math through the 20 years, or we did the math, excuse me, through the 20 years. So at this point, yeah, I'm not quite sure what more to add. At this point, I believe we would need to get some outside advice on the adherence with section 258 sub 5C of the MGA on this, and that would have to bring it back to a later date. I must say to council that any delay on this will delay the intake, and if we delay the intake, we risk the grant. So I apologize because I sound like I'm kind of telling you to take it or leave it, and that's not my intent. But that is the concern of administration on this, and actually one of the big things that administration had been discussing with the grant provider was to make sure we could defensively proceed with all 3 readings here this evening.
Thank you. Councilor LaBerge?
I support this. I just want to make sure that it's okay given the public consultation is all.
Thank you, Councilor LaBerge. Councilor Stashik?
No, well, yeah, I guess. I'm not questioning the math at all because I didn't do the math, but it didn't seem like it was quite adding up for me either, because the principal's changing each year as more of the principal gets paid off. So I was just trying to do some math on what the difference is in the annual payments over the term of it. Unfortunately, it wasn't at the end of it yet, but so I'm not sure.
ICO Hanlon?
Sir, I'm sorry, I know there's other councilors who wish to speak to this. Just Ms. Boutin has her hand up, and I believe she'd like to speak to this matter.
Ms. Boutin? You are muted.
I apologize through to Councillor Labarge. I didn't understand what he was asking. No, I did run those numbers, and it's 15% of the original cost of the capital property. So it would be 15% of the 820,000.
Okay, so you've done the math and we're within. Okay, then.
Yes.
Thank you. My math was high level. I didn't have an amortization table.
Thank you for that, Ms. Boutin and Councilor LaBerge. Councilor Taylor?
My ability to support this depends on the answers to these questions. Are the bid packages opened, and how many units are we building?
Administration?
At this point, I am not sure who's with us administratively. Sir, if I could, to Councilor Taylor, to Winston or Debbie, is there an update available? We certainly haven't awarded yet, but could you give us an update on the status of the tender for the units?
To the chair, to council. I hope you can hear me now. I
Yep.
believe the question from interim CEO Hanlon was, what is the status of the tender at this stage? The status is that we are closing on May the 19th. So what has happened is that just to take council back, we made a quick decision. The proponents that were shortlisted for the modular homes, the 8 at the time, they have 2 out of the 3 have withdrawn. And so we only had 1 that was iffy. So we made the decision and we really looked at the document and we sent it out with immediate effect. So we gave the proponents a full 4 weeks to put together their proposal. So the 19th, the proposals will be back. And if we go back to the original schedule, We haven't lost time based on that schedule. We are still looking at awarding in early July according to the initial schedule that was doable. So that's the latest update. And once May the 19th come, we can probably inform council what the outcome of the submissions are.
Councillor Taylor?
So if I get a good feeling that there's going to be 10 or more units built, then I can support this. 8 units, I can't support this. Is there going to be 10 or more units built?
Mr. Russo?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, through to Councillor Taylor, in the changes in the document, the scripting, we did say that the scoring for the proponents, for those that can demonstrate 8 and greater units, that they will score a weighting of, I think it's 15 out of 100. So we are expecting to see 8+ units. Now, what that 8+ would be, is it 10, is it 9, is it 12? That will eagerly await on May the 19th.
Councillor Taylor?
I have another question. Can you give us some details of the long-term costs, like the management costs and expense minus the revenues? And that would include the cost of our borrowing this $100,000 a year. You know, we got that $2.4 million grant, so we don't have to pay for that. That's a grant. But at least the money we're putting into this, will the revenues at least cover our costs over the long term? I haven't seen the financial information on that to get a feeling whether we're getting into something where at least we're recovering our costs after we consider the 2.4 million, or we're getting into a something where we're going to have to pay out. So not only are we, it won't even make money. It won't even at least cover costs after we've considered the 2.4 million. Can I get some answer to that?
ICO Hanlon?
Sir, respectfully, I'm going to just remind council that we are dealing with a borrowing bylaw for the servicing of the lands, that the broader discussion regarding a separate grant application for the Rapid Housing Initiative is not the agenda item here tonight, and administration is not, it's not that we're not willing to discuss it, we are not prepared, and it's not the agenda item this evening. We would be happy to speak to it, but we are not prepared at this time.
Thank you, ICO Hanlon. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, in that case, I can't support this because I need the answers to my basic questions to know whether the project's in the best interests of the citizens of Hinton. Bit surprised we're voting on a debenture without understanding the basic investment details and how the project is going to work out financially. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I'll be supporting this, and I urge council to support all 3 readings, and I thank ICO Hanlon for commenting. The will of council had already talked about the scope of this project. This was already passed by council. This is an amendment. The will of council agreed on 8 to 10 units, etc. To me, the premise on voting tonight is specifically for the rate change. So if there is issues with the change in the interest rate, which is the amendment only, then to me, we vote on that. To delay this, to rehash a conversation that already has the support of council, to me isn't in good faith with what is presented here today. So to me, again, and we're all in situations where we don't, in principle, support the previous motion, but once the will is decided, this is more of the rate impact. So to me, I urge all of council to focus on the interest rate and any questions. And if that cost difference has an impact on the overall project, I'm okay. Councillor Taylor's second question to me was a little bit more in line with this. The first one, again, the will of council had already spoke to scope. So I will be supporting this. And if not, a worst case scenario, I would look to expedite this for May 10th to be at our special meeting. But again, I'm going to focus on the amendment portion, which is the increase in the cost of borrowing. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Yeah, I'm speaking in favor of it too, and I'm speaking in favor of trying to get all 3 readings done today. To Mayor Michaels' point, this is something council's already shown their support for. They've shown support for the project in principle. They've already agreed to the Debenture bylaw. We wouldn't even be seeing this again, except there's been a rate change, so that has to be approved by council. So I think it's important to move this forward. This is a project that council values. Council's already shown that, and there is no other option. This is where municipalities get their money from. So if the project's moving ahead, we have to agree to it. There's no other option. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Haas. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, normally I'm a proponent of, you know, doing a first or a second reading and then waiting, but in this case, I mean, as the Bank of Canada has indicated here, you know, there's the potential for longer wait time for this to cost us more money. So in terms of the amendment, it's very simple, time is money. The sooner that we can get on board with this and get the application through, potentially that's gonna save the town cash, and that's, I think, important at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any further debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question that council agree to give first reading of bylaw 1167-1, amending bylaw 1167, authorization of debenture as presented. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried 6-1. Council. Councillor Magoon.
I move that council agree to give second reading of bylaw number 1167 dash. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm reading from the right one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that council agree to give second reading of bylaw number 1167 1, amending bylaw 1167 authorization of debenture as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion for second reading. Any debate? Councillor LaBerge.
Can I just ask one question as it relates to the bylaw? I meant to ask this earlier, I just noticed. So in the bylaw, it says the cost of servicing is being estimated to between 600 and 820,000. And we're applying for the bond to be 820,000. So is it still between 600 and 820? I thought that was finalized.
ICO Hanlon.
I believe, and Ruth just confirmed with me this. So, sir, I'm reading from the second paragraph of the proposed bylaw that
Correct.
reads, the cost of servicing is estimated between 600 and 820,000, and the municipality estimated the following grants and contributions be applied to the project. I believe the servicing cost is the interest costs over the 20 years accrued or totaled up. Is that correct, Ruth? I think you're muted, Ruth.
Ms. Boutin, you must unmute.
There you go.
Nope, we,
Her mute button's off though.
yeah, no.
Still can't hear you, Ms. Bowden.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Oh, okay. I would like to defer to Mr. Russo if I could. He probably has more information with regards to those servicing costs than I do.
Through to the chair to Councillor LaBarge. So the 620,000 and change has been if we only did phase one. And through the discussions, we said that if we could get, while we're doing external servicing, we might as well get ready for phase two. So the 820,000, that is based on servicing both phase one and phase two council. And so the number is definitive. So where we drew that from was there was a report done by a consulting engineer that said the total cost for developing the Boutin lands would be in the order of 1.7 million plus. And so what we did was we said if we should do phase one, we allow for pipe sizing accordingly. You're looking at about 820,000 in today's terms to do phase one and two. So it is not between 620 and 820. It is actually that we are aiming to do servicing that would go up to 820,000. That will service phase two as well and make it ready for external servicing simply with a hookup once phase two is initiated in the future.
So I understand all that, but I think that we moved to the 820 a long time ago. And I guess my question is to avoid confusion in the future. I just wonder if we want to say that the cost of servicing is estimated to be 820,000.
Mr. Russo, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to the chair, to Councillor Labarge again. That would be exact language that we could use, because we are confident that the 820 is for servicing the scope of works as defined for this borrowing bylaw.
That's good.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Laberge. Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. Just a little thing to CAO. You keep saying 20 years. It's a 10-year debenture, right? 10 years.
Yes. Correct. I saw 20 mentioned in the lead sheet. When we take a look at the bottom of the first page of the bylaw, sub 1, it does not, so combined principal and interest installments not to exceed 10 years calculated. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Stashik.
It's a simple point of order. I just want to remind council, we've already passed the bylaw. We're just talking about the amendment that's required because of the interest rate. So I don't actually think it's appropriate that we're discussing the bylaw today. That's relatively fair.
I agree.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, any further debate or questions before I call to question second reading amendment? Seeing none, I'll call to question that council agree to give second reading of bylaw 1167-1, amending bylaw 1167, authorization of debenture as presented. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried 6-1. Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move that council consider third and final reading of bylaw number 1167-1, amending bylaw 1167, authorization of debenture as presented. And I would like to speak to it if I can. So this is something, as I said before, council's already expressed their will to move forward. We've already agreed to the bylaw. And again, we wouldn't even be seeing this except for the rate change. I appreciate that there may be some on council who may disagree with the increased cost, may disagree with the premise. However, I would really, really encourage and request that all of council please support moving this towards third reading today. If it doesn't move to third reading today, all it's going to do is delay it, and it's going to potentially cost us even more if there's a rate increase between now and when third reading comes back to council. So I would really request and encourage anybody who has a differing opinion to just please put that differing opinion aside, and in the interest of moving this valuable project forward, to agree to let it go to third reading today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, we have third reading on the floor for amendment. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I will do that. I will do that. I'll vote for it. But I really would like to know the number of units, and I would really like to know the long-term cost. We need those numbers. I sure hope those long-term costs are going to cover at least the cost of our financing, or this is a bigger mess than I thought.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, any further debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question that council consider third and final reading of bylaw 1167-1, amending bylaw 1167, authorization of debenture as presented. Council, all those in favor? And that's passed unanimously. Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to move that council agree to give third and final reading to bylaw number 1167-1, amending bylaw 1167, authorization of debenture as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question that council agree to give third and final reading of bylaw 1167-1, amending bylaw 1167, authorization of debenture as presented. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, anything further for our fourth action item this evening? Seeing none, thank you, administration, council. That'll bring us to our Town of Edson letter, RCMP advocacy. ICO Hanlon.
Thank you, sir. Through you to all of council. And I'm on page 32 of council's agenda package. This is a proposed regional response from the town of Edson, excuse me, regarding the proposed Alberta Provincial Police Service. And the recommended action is that council authorize Mayor Michaels to sign the attached letter to Honorable Tyler Shandro on behalf of the town of Hinton, jointly with the mayors of Edson, Yellowhead County, Whitecourt, and Jasper, expressing concerns regarding the proposed APPS and requesting a joint meeting with the minister and MLA Long regarding this matter. In terms of some background on this, the first page, we do see the email request received March 31st from town of Edson Mayor Zahara, forwarding a draft RCMP advocacy letter, that is attachment 1 to your agenda package, requesting the town of Hinton consider joining a regional approach regarding the APPS opposition. Again, so we do have that, and a follow-up administrative request from April 7th, which is at the top of page 33 from the Chief Administrative Officer from the town of Edson. As discussed, the draft letter is requested to be jointly signed by the West Yellowhead municipalities, forwarded to Minister Shandro, expressing our municipality's concerns with the provincial government's communications and engagements thus far regarding the proposed Alberta Provincial Police Service. And administration seeks a motion authorizing Mayor Michaels to sign this letter jointly on behalf of the town of Hinton. Options are there for the consideration of council. And sir, I don't know that it's necessary to read the draft letter into, everybody's had a chance to review that. Administration is available to answer any questions.
Thank you, ICO Hanlon. I have Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council authorize Mayor Michaels to sign the attached letter to the Honorable Tyler Shandro on behalf of the town of Hinton, jointly with the mayors of Edson, Yellowhead County, Whitecourt, and Jasper, expressing concerns regarding the proposed APPS and requesting a joint meeting with the minister and MLA Long regarding this matter. If I can speak to it, please. You know, I've followed this relatively closely, attended the facilitated I don't want to say workshop, but facilitated sessions that the province did offer. And I agree with the letter that they were extremely difficult to, there was types of questions we couldn't ask. There was lots of questions they couldn't answer. You know, I really think that we need to have a voice in this, you know, and be united on it, because I believe that currently the provincial government is spending a lot of dollars on a proposed change that, from what I've seen, the majority of municipalities don't agree with. And so I think we need to really have the, you know, voice our concerns about that. And from what I also gathered, they might say that the costs are going to be less, but then through that facilitated session, found out that those costs are going to be more to the municipalities and to the province. And there was just a lot of unanswered questions at all. So I'll be in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a motion on the floor. I have Councillor Magoon and Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just want to back out. I think Councillor Taylor was ahead of me, so I just.
No.
Okay. Yeah, then I will speak in favor of this, and I appreciate the municipality of Edson floating this around to neighboring partners. I appreciate that Councillor Hawes was willing to make the motion. Like the mayor and Councillor Hawes, I attended a number of those public engagement sessions that were held on behalf of AUMA in the province, and I was really disappointed on the provincial feedback. It was very clear in those engagements that municipalities in the province had a number of concerns. Chiefly amongst those, AUMA members asked about the plan to fund a brand new police force. AUMA members asked about how we were going to staff that non-existent police force. AUMA members asked about where the specialized equipment and training was going to come from and who was going to pay for that. And in every single instance, we did not receive a specific answer. Essentially what we received was, you know, from at that time, the Minister of Justice, this is something our rural communities want, we're gonna give this to you, whether you want it or not. And yet the large number of voices at that meeting was overwhelmingly not in support of that. I think this is an instance, and I want to maintain the important relationships we have with our elected officials at the provincial level. But this is a case where I think we need to take a reasoned stance, and we need to very clearly let them know that we don't feel this is appropriate, and we'd like them to consider the direction that they're going, and we still have time to pump the brakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGoon. Councillor Taylor.
I believe that when we go to the provincial or federal government, we should be trying to further the town's top 2 to 3 priorities. And that anything that deflects from that should be put on the back burner. I just sat through a 1.5-day strategic planning process where this wasn't even mentioned in the process as a town priority. I don't think a position one way or another on this issue serves the taxpayers of Hinton, whether we support the RCMP, whether we support a provincial police force. We support the priorities in that strategic plan. I'd certainly support inviting the MLA or member of parliament to come and discuss the town's priorities as per our strategic planning process, and I think that's a good idea. And further, if the mayor is going to sign this letter, then I would ask the mayor if he's comfortable with the language in the letter. There's some very strong language in this letter, but ultimately the mayor has to put his signature to it, so he's the one that has to wear it. So if he's comfortable signing things with added further insult, government of Alberta is not interested in what Albertans have to say, and then next week asking him for money for the water treatment plant, I don't think that's in the interests of the taxpayers of Hinton. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor LaBerge.
I was going to make similar comments, and I did sit through those as well. And really, that was supposed to be an engagement process. They weren't at that point yet ready to sell anything. And but this says they do not constitute a true consultation and were used only to check a box. I mean, again, I don't know that that's the argumentative letter that we want to send out right now. Just my thought.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Hawes, then Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I see it a little bit differently because this is going to impact our community because they're looking at no longer a 70% budget, but 100% of budget to our police services. There will no longer be a 30% from our federal government. So in the long run, this is going to hit the pockets of our community, and it's going to, whether it's our municipality or provincially, it's going to hit the pockets of our residents. And so I guess I beg to differ. I think it is a priority of our community. This is a service that is potentially going to change, cost taxpayers more money, cost the municipality more money, cost overall the province more money. And I guess I strongly agree that they are not listening. I've listened to AUMA voice their opinion, and the province continues to go forth. I've talked to many municipalities through conferences that I have not run into one person from any municipality, small or large, that's in favor of this at all. So I think it may not be part of our strategic plan, but I believe part of our strategic plan too is to fiscally responsible to our residents. And I believe that this decision of province is not fiscally responsible to the town of Hinton and the taxpayers. So I support this again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in agreement with Councillors Taylor and LaBerge. I have concerns about the proposed provincial police force as well. But at this point, I feel it's important that respectful relationships are maintained between municipalities and provincial, federal levels of government, and that communication between those levels needs to be kept respectful. Though I have questions, concerns, I do have concerns with this letter too, and the tone that this letter presents. As Councillor Taylor said, there's awfully accusatory language in here. And the one thing that hasn't brought up yet is our municipalities believe that changing our police services in the province is the wrong decision. For myself, I haven't got enough evidence at this point to categorically state that it's a wrong decision. I certainly think there needs to be more conversation, more discussion, more debate, and informed, respectful input. But I can't say today that it's a wrong decision, and I can't support this letter because of the way it's worded. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. I had had conversations with other mayors regarding this. This is a peculiar letter because there's really two aspects to it. One is a request for a meeting speaking to the current circumstances of where the negotiations and the communications are, and the other element is the actual meeting that the town of Edson had. So I think there's a compromise here to potentially direct the mayor that in the town of Hinton to write a letter of support pertaining to our concerns with the overall communications and to ask for a meeting in conjunction with this letter, but separate over signing off. And I think, as I said, this was a concern of other municipalities of putting two issues into one letter, which is really, expressing their discontent with a previous meeting with a request. So if there's an appetite, and I sense there's an appetite from council to speak to it, I would request a hybrid motion to direct the mayor to write a letter of support for a meeting pertaining to the letter, would be my recommendation. And then we can draft a letter and send that to Minister Shandro. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, just to speak to that, I would support, and in fact, that would be my preferred choice. As I had mentioned before, I'd rather us maintain a respectful relationship with our elected officials and get to the heart of the matter, which is really the true cost or benefit of the potential service. So provided something follows up on this, and I get the feeling as well that that is very likely what the will of council would be, I would be willing to change my support in favor of an alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Hawes.
So to be clear, to clarify, you'd rather, I guess the motion that you're potentially proposing is the meeting with the mayor of Edson to have that conversation. I'm prepared to withdraw this motion at this time. To speak to, I don't agree with what's happening, as I spoke to already, but I do agree with my fellow councillors in regards to if the wording is too harsh or is too confrontational, I'm not opposed to switching that up. So I will withdraw the motion at this time and then look forward to another. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a request to remove the motion or withdraw the motion. Any debate or any opposition? Seeing none, motion is withdrawn. Council, any appetite to give an alternative direction? Seeing Councillor Stashik.
I'll take a stab at it. I'd like to move that council authorizes Mayor Michaels to draft a letter Do we want to bring it up just so I can see? Is that easier? I don't know. Sometimes I can't remember what I said. So. To Honorable Tyler Shandro. On behalf of the town of Hinton, requesting a joint meeting with the minister and MLA Long regarding this matter. For council approval. I get to speak to it. So there's kind of two steps in there. It's to draft a letter and to get it back to council, and then it would come to council for ultimate decision later once council sees content of the letter and if they support it or not, or if there's any changes required. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Councillor LaBerge?
Taylor had his hand up. Just getting out of the way.
Councillor Taylor.
I don't mind that. But if we throw our hat in with a bunch of people that are gonna send a letter that's worded like this, that's not our wisest course. But if we're gonna have a meeting and have a respectful discussion regarding that in a objective fashion, fine. But if we throw our letter in and say we're gonna meet with a couple other towns and they throw this kind of letter in, that's not part of what I wanna be about.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor LaBerge?
Chandro is take off the C and add an S. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge, for that. Councillor Magoon?
I'm just wondering if Councillor Stashik would accept a friendly amendment to remove the word joint.
Councillor Stashik?
I'd be fine with removing, if that's what, if council wants to have a meeting with just our municipality so that we're, as Councillor Taylor said, not associated, but with the aggressive tone and attitude that's represented in the draft letter or the proposed letter, I'd be fine with that. I'm fine with doing the meeting with them too. I'm fine either way, whatever the will of council is. So I guess what I'm saying then, by saying that in a roundabout way, I'd prefer, if that was Councillor Magoon's thoughts, I'd prefer to go through an actual amendment then, because then council can express their will if that's what they want or not.
If I may make that amendment then, Mr. Mayor, to amend the motion to remove the word joint.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. There'll be, the motion right now is simply to amend, which would remove the word joint, and then we will go back to the main motion after the vote to amend, which would change the main motion. So you're not voting on the main motion right now, just the wording, and then there'd be a second motion to pass overall. So
If I could speak to it
Yep.
as well before. Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why I very much favor just a meeting with the minister is that one of the requests I think we've heard from the public and also from our elected officials is to reach out and try and have more of those meetings with our ministers and with our MLAs. And again, in this instance, I think it's important to identify that Minister Chandro, he is not the minister who began these negotiations and these investigations. So again, it's important to reach out. And you know, from my own experiences as a councillor and a citizen, I've always found MLA Long to be extremely responsive to these sorts of things in a very positive way. So thank you.
thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have an amendment on the floor. Councillor Taylor?
A friendly amendment to your amendment. Would you like to explain what we're going to meet with him about?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, may I, Mr. Mayor?
Procedurally, we're voting on whether it's a joint or a meeting by itself. So again, we will be able to go to the main motion and speak to the context,
Okay.
I believe. But if that will impact your decision on the,
No, I'll vote for that. What's the main motion again? Can I see that?
Point of procedure, if I may.
yep.
I'm not familiar with how this program works, but I'm not seeing this as an amendment that council's voting on. And that's what Councillor Magoon's proposed, is an actual amendment to the
Yeah.
motion.
So for, and thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Stashik, but just, I believe administration may be doing something.
I believe we're going to address that right now, and it will reflect
Okay.
that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Councillor Taylor?
May I?
Mhm.
If we're going to have a meeting, would we also talk about the policing of Alberta, and we should do that? Talk to him about that. Would we talk to him about other issues that we have related to policing at the same time? That would just be a given as part of the conversation. You know, backlog pay.
Councillor Stashik.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to point of order again. There's a proposed amendment. We have to talk about the amendment, discuss the amendment, and vote on the amendment before we can talk about the main motion. I'm happy to address that, but we procedurally, we have to take care of the amendment first.
Councillor Taylor.
I'm okay with that. I just asked what the main amendment, what's the main motion?
If I may,
That's it.
it's the motion that is on the screen. And then there will be an amendment that will just change the main motion that we will then have a second vote on after. So we're just changing whether it will be a joint meeting or an individual meeting.
Sure, okay.
And then the motion will come back to the floor.
Sure, that's fine. I'll
Okay.
keep quiet.
Yeah. Councillor LeBerge.
I think we have a much better chance at getting a meeting if it's a joint meeting, so I think that I won't be supporting the amendment.
Just, I'll be speaking against it. I want a joint meeting with, if Whitecourt and other communities around us are having a meeting, I believe this is actually a very good compromise. We're not attaching ourselves with the wording. We can't control what other municipalities say, but if Whitecourt, Jasper, Edson, and other municipalities are meeting collectively, I believe we should be there with our regional partners. But again, we just simply don't sign off on the letter that they are sending. But there is, I believe, a synergy in going collectively to the province and sharing our concerns. And we can always request a secondary meeting for our overall policing issues. This is to address something that our municipal partners want to do currently, which is to collectively lobby regarding getting better communication and better process from the provincial government. So for me, I want to support a joint meeting and still entertain a future meeting on overall things. So I'll be speaking against the amendment to remove the word joint. Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be speaking against removing the word joint as well, because I think we not only have to think of our provincial partners, but also our municipal partners in our surrounding areas as well, to exclude them from that. And I think to be respectful, they have concerns, maybe we do too, have those conversations in joint, so I won't be supporting the amendment to remove it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, any further debate before I call to question the amendment? Seeing none.
Sorry.
Councillor Stashik.
I apologize. Point of order, Mr. Mayor. It wasn't a friendly amendment. It's an
Oh,
amendment and it hasn't been voted on yet. It says that it was carried. It
No,
says resolution RCC 2.
That's my fault. I didn't remove it yet, sorry.
So I'll be calling to question in a moment to remove the word joint, and which is a regular amendment. Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Stashik. Council, any further debate? Seeing none, I'll call Councillor Taylor.
Yes, it says you're in favor of removing the word joint. A no says you'd like just an individual meeting. I just want to be careful.
For clarity, if you vote in favor, we will be having a single meeting.
Okay, good.
If you vote against, then the word joint will remain there and it will be a collective meeting.
Super duper, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. And you, as our mayor, you are saying you would like to have a joint meeting with other municipalities on this?
Correct. Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, anything further before I call the amendment to question? Seeing none, I'll call to question to remove the word joint. All those in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. We will go back to the main motion now. Council, any questions on the main motion? Seeing none.
But don't see it yet.
Oh. Council, Councillor LeBerge.
There's no S on the end of Chandro.
There you go.
Thank you, Councillor LeBerge. Council,
Unless there's two of them.
Council, any further debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question. The council authorize Mayor Michaels to draft a letter to Honorable Tyler Shandro on behalf of the town of Hinton requesting a joint meeting with the Minister, MLA, and MLA Long regarding the matter for council approval. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried unanimously. Council, anything further for our fifth item? Seeing none, that'll bring us to our last action item, which is our Economic Development Budget Report, MD 2529, closed, no longer closed session. ICO Hanlon.
Thank you, sir. Just at this moment, I have a properly redacted version of the report you saw just a little earlier. I'll hand that out at this time.
This is confidential.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, through you to all of council, and speaking to the item I've just handed out at this time, I thank you for the opportunity to discuss this in open session. This does combine an earlier request that we received from the Wild Mountain Music Festival, but it led to a broader discussion of council regarding the status of the 2022 economic development budget. And so administratively, I've brought this back and wish to bring this before council to just correctly identify where we believe we're at with the economic development budget, and I believe offer an opportunity to fund at least the Wild Mountain Music Festival, their request that came before council earlier. So again, on April 5th, 2022, council heard from Rob Deroux, attending and representing the 2022 Wild Mountain Music and the Autumn Music Festivals. A request for funding was made for each of these music festivals. This request was subsequently considered during the April 12th Committee of the Whole, which identified uncertainty with administration regarding the current status of the 2022 economic development budget. The following motion, CW 220315.05, was passed by the committee seeking confirmation of the 2022 economic development budget and if there were adequate monies to fund this request. Reading that previous committee motion, it was moved by Councillor Magoon that the committee of the whole accept this update as information, direct administration, and bring this matter to the May 3rd, 2022 regular council meeting for a decision regarding options that consider any existing economic development budget, and that was carried unanimously. After April 12th, the manager responsible for the economic development area, with the assistance of the finance department, completed a thorough review of the approved 2022 economic development budget. And as shown in the table below, it does confirm that budget. Sorry, the language doesn't reflect the redaction, so I apologize. Essentially, what we were able to confirm, and I am pleased to report to council, we had thought that the numbers were quite a bit lower, and that was what I had previously reported to council. What we have confirmed, and when I say confirmed, this is everything that's been expended year to date, and you will see allocated funds. So though they're redacted, the allocated funds are funds we understand have been committed to by the town and by the economic development area. It does allow us and does show the possibility of a remaining budget of $105,306. So specifically, and to the Wild Mountain Music Festival, administration has confirmed that we believe confirmed that there's adequate monies, that there is up to $5,000 in uncommitted funding available for this donation. I do and will acknowledge that in the past we have typically provided $5,000, and this is coming from Mr. Deroux. And in response, The Mountain Music Festival then provided 20 tickets back to the town, essentially a value of $2,000, 20 tickets at $100 a pop. Mr. Daru has indicated he'd prefer simply a $3,000 donation with no tickets in return. I can say certainly administratively, I'm in full support of that, and I won't speak to what may have happened in the past, but appropriately, it should be a $3,000 donation if council wishes, and we do believe the monies are available to do that. Regarding the remaining confirmed 2022 economic development budget, which we believe is just over $100,000. It is the intent of myself and my team to investigate and seek suitable opportunities to invest these budgeted monies in the support of economic development in 2022. As these remaining funds are primarily correctly budgeted as salary and benefits within the economic development area, any significant proposed expenditure of remaining 2022 funds, excluding those already committed or allocated through the agreement. What I mean by that, they're already budgeted. They are already anticipated in council's approved budget. Those will be brought back to council for authorization. So I'm not suggesting it has to be $100,000 in human resources, salaries, etc. I'm looking to differentially spend these monies, and I will bring and ask council for direction and authorization to do so. So we are investigating opportunities with some of our partners here in the town of Hinton. And once we have identified some opportunities which we believe have merit, we will come back to council before committing to those, and we will seek a council motion authorizing us to do so. This will give us some time through the balance of 2022 to ensure that we confirm what the philosophy on economic development for the town is going to be going forward, and as we prepare the 2023 budget. With that, options at the bottom of the page. First, I would ask that council accept this economic development budget report 2022 update as information, and then a second motion be considered. Number two being possibly that council direct administration to allocate $3,000 from the confirmed 2022 economic development budget in support of the Wild Mountain Music Festival, as was presented to the April 12th, 2022 Committee of the Whole for information. Number three, that council direct administration to allocate essentially a different number, if you wish. Number four, that you direct administration to allocate the full $5,000 or up to the full $5,000 from another source. And number five, that council direct administration not to allocate any money at this time. Again, administratively, and from the author, I am recommending options 1 and 2 of this report. Sir, I am available to answer any questions.
Thank you, ICO Hanlon. I have Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Just before council begins discussion and deliberation, I have a question for administration. As this is a late addition to the agenda that didn't form part of the public agenda, how will this be distributed to the public and the media? And is it, I'm assuming nothing on the redacted version is proprietary, it can be shared?
So what is on the redacted version? So thank you, sir. So through you, sir, to Councillor Ostashek and to all of the council, we will update our council agenda package with this information. So we'll amend the agenda and release it. What you do have is you can share. And so anything previously, and the reason for the redaction on the table is most anybody could do some simple math and figure out some information that should not be publicly available.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council, Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, I will make a motion that council accept this economic development budget report 2022 update as information. Briefly, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate fellow councillors identifying that it's best to deal with this in public. I think most transparently, that's great. I appreciate administration bringing it forward in public. And ultimately, I think what this forms is a bit of an opportunity, seeing as we're just moving out of strategic planning. That, you know, this is something that helps us consider where we're going to move forward with in regards to economic development and what our opportunities are. So, and again, because it's in public, it's something that can form part of a public conversation. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Taylor.
I don't know why we wouldn't just allocate $3,000 from this budget to the Wild Mountain Music Festival. Why would we go for option 2?
If I may, both are recommended by administration to do both motions, but Councillor Magoon has only provided one for right now.
Oh, so we can do both motions, you think? Okay, super duper, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any further debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question that council accept the Economic Development Budget Report 2022 update as information. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, any further? Councillor LaBerge.
I would like to make a motion. We'll save some time. I'm talking about motion 2, Jen, please. And if I might speak to it, I'm far more comfortable with this. I always thought it was a little weird that taxpayer money was given and then free tickets were given out because taxpayer money was given. So I'm way more comfortable with this, but this is an important thing in the community, and I'm really happy to see council step up and support it even in a small way. I think we're going into year 13 now. Most festivals last about 6 or 7, so we're twice as good as everybody else. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Council, we have a motion on the floor, which is the second recommended action by administration. Council, any debate? Councillor Taylor.
You sounded like you didn't want to hear that,
No.
but anyways. No, I support this too, and somewhere down the line, I think having a fund of money for groups, to be fair to this group and to be fair to other groups, where per head funding when they bring people from out of town and fill beds in the community and give them a little bit of seed money, you know, whether it's this Challenge for the Rockies, whether it's a hockey team that brings people in, a sort of, I'm not sure, some towns have it, just it doesn't come to my mind as to exactly what it is, and set a fund. So we're doing that fairly to people, you know, a fund of $10 per child, and then you have to bring a parent and a grandparent and up to a certain, etc. So I think I see this as part of a bigger picture down the road someplace, as part of an economic plan to bring out of town events into Hinton. That's what I see here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Council, any further debate or questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question that council direct administration to allocate $3,000 from the confirmed 2022 economic development budget in support of the Wild Mountain Music Festival, as was presented to the April 12, 2022 Committee of the Whole for information. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, anything further for our last action item? Councillor LaBerge.
I would just like to say thank you to administration. I think I was a little harsh last time when I said there was, when we found out that there wasn't any money in economic development. This cheers me up a lot, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Councillor LaBerge, and thank you, administration. That'll bring us to our reporting for this evening, and I will begin on my right with Councillor Taylor.
Nothing really too extreme to report. However, Thursday night, there's an opportunity with the Rotary Club to clean up the highway, and all of council is more than welcome at 6 o'clock till 8 o'clock to help beautify our town before the long weekend and clean up that garbage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Race.
Nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor LaBerge.
Nothing to report.
Thank you, Councillor LaBerge. Councillor Ostashik.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I did attend Community Futures West Yellowhead meeting last week. However, there wasn't really anything that came out of that meeting that's would be of interest to council, so nothing in particular to report from the meeting. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ostashik. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, it's something fairly serious I saw online that it bears identifying. For those people who might not be aware, 34 years ago, we had a citizen of Hinton, Shelley-Ann Baskew, almost to the day, went missing, and she was never found by her family. RCMP investigation didn't really turn up anything useful in closing that case for the family and the friends of that young lady. And what I saw last night, and again, social media is always a dangerous animal. But what I saw was something that her mother had posted, where she had felt that the town of Hinton had never formally identified this as a major event that occurred within the town, and she had felt that really it was something that had just been set aside. And so I wanted to take some time within council tonight to say, for myself, and I'm sure for the rest of council, that that's, for us at least, that's not the case. This is still something that we talk about within my workplace. There's people who went to school with Shelly Ann, who were friends and family members of her. We as a community, I want to reassure her family that we don't forget that people still talk about this. And, for anybody who might have information out there, and I understand our audience is really truly limited, but hopefully that these sorts of words get out and people can share any potential tips or information that will bring the family and friends some closure. I think that's important. If you could please bring that to the RCMP and to Shelly Ann's family. To the best of our ability, we stand with you. We remember your daughter. She was an important part of our community, and you have the best of our thoughts and wishes. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon, for that. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess on those sentiments, I wasn't going to share it till next week, but there is on the 18th of this month, it's the National Victims and Survivors of Crime Week as well, and there's going to be a candlelight vigil in Green Square at that time at 6 p.m. and there'll be a number of people attending with words and looking at what kind of things in our community provide those supports to those survivors of crime. So just some food for thought on those same sentiments that Councillor Magoon shared. The other matter I just want to share is Yellowhead County has now hired a waste management manager. So we were scheduled to have a meeting this month as a board, but the manager starts on the 16th. Our board meeting was on the 18th. So wanted to give them a little bit of time to get settled in before our meeting as a board. So that'll be rescheduled, but we do have now a hired manager. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. For myself, I guess on behalf of council, just to update the community that we have begun our recruitment process for permanent CEO. We have selected the Vogel Group. We had our preliminary meeting with Mr. Rick Vogel. No current timelines exactly, but just to update the community that process under policy 1109 or bylaw 1109 has begun, and there'll be further updates in the coming weeks. Bridges is hosting a trivia night on Friday, so anyone, there are words about potentially combining a council administration team, so anyone from administration, I'll be sending a follow-up email, a good idea. I think it was Councillor Hawes that had shared that. There are 3 spots, so 3 and 3, get the all the best trivia people we can find to win, because winning is everything. But no, and it goes to a great cause because Bridges is a great organization. So hope to see many people there on Friday evening, 7 p.m. With that, I'll hand it off to our ICAO, Mr. Hanlon.
Thank you, sir. Just to update council and to any of our residents joining us here, we have shortlisted and we are continuing to be in the recruitment process for a legislative coordinator clerk. It's important recruitment. It's important for the community and for council, and hoping to pull a good recruit in and attract them to the town of Hinton. We are going to market as well, and just update council, have started advertising for new director of corporate services, and that's an important recruitment as well for the town. So those 2 are moving forward. I did want to just let council also know that we are in the midst of preparing a psychological health and safety plan. So this is, so maybe building on some of what I heard council speaking on a little earlier, this is building from a health and safety perspective on the importance of mental health and the importance of the protection of the mental health of our staff and the individuals who serve the community here and are served by our teams. And so really excited and working on rolling that out the 2nd quarter of this year. And I think that's pretty much all I've got in terms of status report at this time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ICO Hanlon. With that, that'll bring us to our notices of motion. Council, any notices of motion? Seeing none, we have no closed session items. So Councillor Magoon.
I'd like to move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor?